Public Domain Super Villains. Here on the Dire Gentleman channel, we host a wide variety of content. We have a number of different video series and styles that we've cycled through in our long history and backlog, and you can check that out for yourself if you think I'm kidding. But one of my personal favorite kinds of videos that I've gotten to do solo in the past has been my coverage of public domain superheroes. Now, the public domain is a fantastic resource. When characters, settings, concepts, even entire stories enter into the public domain, they can be reused or recontextualized in whatever narrative that you, a modern-day writer or creator, might spin. And when it comes to the superheroes, a lot of the superhero characters from the golden age of comics back during World War II became public domain, and thus there's an entire wiki dedicated to them, which also catalogs a number of other superheroic and super villainous characters. And so today, we'll be covering the super villainous side of that equation. Who are some of the most villainous, nefarious characters that you can use in just about any story you want? And trust me, some of these will surprise you. Before I get into the list, I do want to recommend checking out the Public Domain Superhero Wiki. It's an excellent resource, and without it, I would not be able to do these types of videos or even know about some of these characters on this list, or know that they were in the public domain. With that being said, we've got 10 nefarious and evil public domain supervillains to get through, so let's begin right now. First on the list is the Super Fiend, seen here standing next to Stardust the Super Wizard, who I covered in my last Public Domain Superheroes video. I have since learned that Stardust the Super Wizard actually made a cameo in Alan Moore's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen series. Just as he was in his true comic counterpart, Stardust the Super Wizard was known for doling out disproportionate punishments to petty criminals. Like, for example, in one of his old stories, he took these bank robbers and put them on a planet made entirely of precious minerals. But the gravity was so rough that they couldn't pick up and grab any of it. Also, time was passing slowly and they would just slowly starve to death on this planet. Insane thing to do, really, for just robbery. You know, maybe you could put them in like a nice room where they're kept away from society and then just, you know, treat it a little bit better. The Super Fiend is actually a bad guy, though. He used a death ray to light Mars on fire and then a different ray to hurl the molten Mars at Earth, so he did need to be stopped. What's just really funny is the way that Stardust fights him. You see, when the two of them get down to their planet and they're gonna duke it out, Stardust grows him, the Super Fiend, to Stardust's own size with big, bulky, disproportionate muscles and everything. And this is to give him a fighting chance. Stardust then proceeds to knock out the Super Fiend in but a single blow. Stardust and his over-the-top, very punitive antics have never ceased to amaze me, and the Super Fiend is another testament to just how far this hero goes in pursuit of being the bigger, stronger man. Next up is Poker Face, a man whose face is entirely featureless and white. And no, that's not a mask, that's just how his face looks. You'd think this would make him incredibly good at card games, especially poker, right? But you'd be wrong. He's actually trying to get revenge for losing a card game against some maybe dirty cheaters or some mobsters. Doesn't really matter. The thing is, the guy can't win legitimately, so he starts using poison blow darts to take out this other group of poker players, and then he ends up in a scuffle with the superhero Blackjack. So it's a good gambling-themed character versus an evil gambling-themed character. Truly a showdown for the ages. I would have thought that gambling was seen as pretty immoral at the time that these comics were big, but no, I guess it was more of a neutral thing. It's got a light side and a dark side. I think the biggest question about Poker Face is, how is he able to use a blow dart and, like, eat food and talk normally when he has a face like that? Next up, we have King WALRO, the leader of the Walrus Men, who is attempting to perform a coup on the Kingdom of Polaris, which is an undersea kingdom ruled by a prince who is apparently the love interest of the superhero Neptina. Now, funny thing, when I was looking into Neptina and Brad Fletcher, who is the Navy captain who investigates her and teams up with her at the time, it seems like Neptina was initially interested in Brad, and Brad didn't really like her, so now she's interested in this undersea prince guy, you know, a sort of stick-to-your-own type of thing. And really, that feels very of the times. I don't know why this man was like, no, a girl from the ocean? Ugh. It's a very strange sort of thing, and really, WALRO just seems to be in the periphery to it. It seems like he's over here with his walrus men, they're trying to conquer this kingdom, and they gotta deal with this complex love life that's happening on all these pages, and he's just like, hey, look, I'm a walrus! Like, deal with that first, right? Yeah, I don't know, I didn't read it, but what I do know is that this guy is a king of the walrus people, and he calls himself WALRO. That would be like a king of, like, humans, calling himself, like, Huma. The absolute confidence to just, like, name yourself what you are and try to take over a kingdom anyway, even though your species is all male and no one's gonna take you seriously and everyone else seems to be so caught up in their own love lives. Mad respect, I guess, which is more than I can say for the next guy. And here we come to General Loki. No, he is not another multiverse variant of the MCU's Loki. He doesn't even look like he'd be played by Tom Hiddleston. He is a man with facial hair very similar to mine, who wants to conquer Earth first and then conquer every other planet to become the king of every world in the universe. Big, ambitious guy. Apparently he's armed with a destroyer disintegrator bazooka, and he's from a planet called Hela. So I bring this character mostly up to show that you can just take any name from Norse mythology and slap it onto any kind of character and motivation, and it still just, like, kinda works. Like, if this guy's name was, like, General, like, Blungardus, and he's from the planet Mabdatron, like, you wouldn't care. You wouldn't be like, ah, this is, I get this. But because he's Loki and because he's from the planet Hela, you're like, oh, alright, I'll hear this guy out. Of course, then he's the most generic bad guy of all time. But if you do want this weird take on Loki, who is a military commander who blows things up with a bazooka, then you can have him. He's yours. He's public domain. You're perfectly allowed to do this, and as long as you call him General Loki and he looks a little bit like that, then you won't get sued by Disney, which is the best any of us can really hope for. Next up is the very unfortunately named Ugly Man. Ugly Man is a circus performer who is, in universe, the ugliest man in the world, or at least that's what he's billed as. And because he gets so upset with being ridiculed as the ugliest man, he starts trying to take revenge on all these people. So during the Ugly Man's rampage of revenge, the superhero the Hangman shows up and tries to instill self-worth in him. But of course, the Hangman is a terrifying hangman superhero, so Ugly Man doesn't really buy it, and he runs around, he ends up in a hall of mirrors, which is the last place he wants to be, and then in trying to escape from the Hangman, he dives through the hall of mirrors and ends up dying. It's a really tragic, sad one. It's just the story of a person who was ridiculed by society, exploited by a circus, and then approached by a vigilante of the law. And none of it, there's no happy ending to this. But if you want to use the Ugly Man in your story and give him a slightly better ending, or maybe play up the tragic elements a bit more, or even make him uglier, you know? Like, he is the Ugly Man. You could make him uglier than this. He kind of looks like that one girl from Hunter x Hunter with the songs. So I guess she also has a curse that made her ugly. So I don't know. Maybe write a fanfiction shipping those two. I mean, they look like they're the same thing. But would Ugly Man go for someone who looks exactly like him? Because does he have internalized ugliness? Oh, the thematic complexity of Ugly Man. He's like ugly and a man. It's like old Captain Knuckles said, a man is not a man unless he's ugly. You've heard of the Joker, but have you heard of the Jingler, society's latest menace? The Jingler is a down-on-his-luck poet who gets rejected by a number of publishers, and then in a last-ditch effort to get his poetry read, he starts committing murders and then leaving his poetry there at the scene of the crime. I actually kind of dig this. This is hilarious because it's a guy who's like Well, people always pay attention to, like, when serial killers, like, you know, have their, like, weird manifestos and stuff, so I know I'll just put my art at the scene of the crimes. What I love about this too is that the murders and having the poetry there, like, at the crime scene, it doesn't really solve the poverty and starving problem of him being, like, a failing poet. It just kind of compounds it because now he has the police on his tail. Regardless, I think the Jingler deserves a feature film. Mostly because his name is the Jingler. And that would be incredible to say, hey, you want 2 tickets for the Jingler? Yeah, I want 2 tickets for the Jingler. Oh boy. So there's usually a big elephant in the room when it comes to these public domain superheroes of this era, the golden age of comics. And that's because this took place around World War II, and a lot of these comic books were intended to be pro-American propaganda in fighting against the Third Reich. Where that factors into villains is that a lot of the villains would have been connected to Germany and the Axis powers. So naturally I decided I was going to filter out most of these because they're just kind of the Red Skull from Marvel, just in a million different skins. However, I would be remiss not to include the majesty that is Hitler's Rex. It is a massive, impractical superweapon used to combat the superhero Boy King and the Giant, who is like a giant mecha robot guy. It's piloted by a guy named Crane, who apparently had a grudge against the superhero, and it's around for 1 battle before being completely destroyed. Now, putting aside how hilarious the name is, isn't this kind of like exactly accurate to how a lot of German superweapons actually were? Just these big, stupid, money-wasting experiments that got blown up or didn't even make it that far onto the battlefield to get blown up. They were really inefficient at running a war machine, and it's important that people know that because one thing you gotta know about fascists is that they lose. They're very good at losing, and they lose hilariously. And they're going to continue to lose. Who knows what the next Hitler's Rex will be? Okay, now we're getting into some unexpected ones. For example, did you know that Dan BACKSLIDE of the Dover Boys is public domain? Yes, that Dan BACKSLIDE. Now the whole Dover Boys cartoon is of course public domain at this point, but Dan BACKSLIDE, he can now be placed in just about any piece of media that you so choose him to be. Now this personally makes me so happy because who doesn't love the antics of Dan BACKSLIDE? He could be out there stealing as many runabouts as he can in the world, and no one will ever know! And if you can see the potential in Dan BACKSLIDE being public domain as much as I can see it, then I expect you to write a short Dan BACKSLIDE fanfiction in the comments. Whatever you so choose. Bonus points if Dan BACKSLIDE and me are teaming up to commit some sort of crime. I'll approve the comments, because I approve of crime. No, not that Orochimaru. That Orochimaru is a very specific Orochimaru, and it belongs to Masashi Kishimoto, as well as anything that has published Naruto. I am speaking of the Orochimaru, who is the villain of the original Japanese folktale, The Tale of the Gallant Jiraiya. And yes, this means that Tsunade and Jiraiya are also public domain, at least their names are, and you can use those, but for right now, we're focusing on Orochimaru. So the Orochimaru that shows up in the original Tale of the Gallant Jiraiya was a follower of Jiraiya, who himself was a powerful ninja capable of shapeshifting. He initially goes by the name Yashigoro before being corrupted by his pursuit of snake ninjutsu. He starts practicing all these different snake spells, eventually able to transform into a snake, and he takes on the name Orochimaru, Orochi from the 8-headed serpent that was slayed by Susanoo in Japanese mythology, in order to battle his master Jiraiya. The betrayal and the snake venom leaves Jiraiya poisoned and almost dying until his other students, including Tsunade, save him. What's interesting about the recontextualization of Orochimaru in Naruto is that Orochimaru and Tsunade are all Jiraiya's age, and they all just sort of like work alongside him. It would be interesting to use the kind of Yashigoro variant of the character, as in this guy who starts off kind of a good guy, a good ninja, but goes a little bit too far in pursuit of a specific gimmick. In this case, snakes. He just really, really, really loves snakes. Your Yashigoro / Orochimaru could be just about anything. And I would really like to see what another version of this character could be. Because, honestly, the name is just so cool. Yamato no Orochi, but like a guy? That's pretty cool. And here we are at the final public domain supervillain. I mentioned earlier that I approve of crime, and I could not approve of this character any more than I possibly do, because he is Mr. Crime. Now, Mr. Crime is a physical embodiment of the concept of crime. He will whisper in people's ears and make them commit crimes, but his allegiance is not just to criminals who commit crimes. He also tries to influence police officers for them to murder and kill criminals, because as long as there is carnage and there is crime occurring, he thrives. This is incredible because Mr. Crime, in a based way, includes police brutality under his definition of crime. He wants crimes to be occurring at every level of society, from the top to the bottom. And I've heard that his anthology series, Crime Doesn't Pay, is full of fascinating little stories of crime just kind of being both angel and devil on someone's shoulder and pushing them specifically to commit crimes. He's also a guy with a hat that says crime on it. He's the best. This is an incredible villain, and because he can be used in anything, and because he's so versatile, I had to make him the end of the list. I know these aren't ranked a top 10, but he is the character that oh man, I love him. For anyone who knows the anime The Laughing Salesman, or any kind of Twilight Zone-esque thing, but with a central figure who comes and corrupts people, Mr. Crime seems to be that sort of character, and I'm all about it. In fact, if this video gets to 500 likes, I will go through the Crime Doesn't Pay comic books and do a full review of it, because the character just seems so fascinating, so versatile, and I really enjoy him. But what did you think? Who was your favorite of all of these public domain supervillains? Or how would you like to use one of these public domain people in your stories? That's the thing about these kinds of videos. We can really just go all day. I mean, there's so much creative potential in investigating these kinds of stories and these kinds of characters, and it's just a wonderful resource, and I would love to do another one of these again soon if you guys seem to respond to it. So tell me everything you think down below. If you haven't subscribed to the Dire Gentleman channel and you want better videos than this and more varied videos than this, you can subscribe right there, and also check out our Patreon, where we do all kinds of weird videos that are a little bit too niche for YouTube. Until next time, I'll be seeing you in the near future.